Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be posted publicly. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Now, I'd like to turn the call over to Deb Rivera. Deb, you may begin.
Great, thank you so much. Well, welcome and good afternoon, everyone. We are excited to have you all joining us today. My name is Deb Rivera, and I will be the host for today's webinar, What is Microdata Access Tool? Building Tables Using MDAT, where we will learn all about the Microdata Access Tool, which is available through data.census.gov, and is a tool that allows users to create custom tabulations with public use microdata from a variety of surveys and years. So for this webinar event, I am joined by my colleagues, and we will be providing support to our speaker by monitoring the chat, sending you helpful links, and also answering as many questions as we can throughout the hour. We are encouraging participants to use the Q&A panel in WebEx to submit questions throughout the presentation, and to keep an eye on the chat panel for links and other helpful information that we'll be sending out. If you send a question via the Q&A panel, please make sure to use the All Panelists option to submit. That way all of our panelists can see your question. We will also have a live question and answer session towards the end of the webinar. We are allowing one question per participant. Participants who would like to ask a question are welcome to use the raise hand icon, which appears next to your name in WebEx. That will prompt us to open up your line, and then you'll need to unmute yourself to ask your question. A quick note, the question and answer session at the end of the webinar will focus primarily on the platform data.census.gov/MDAT. We will not be able to go in depth to address questions on 2020 census products or data. And as always, we are recording the webinar today, and all of the materials for this training will be available through the Census Academy website. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. And now I'll go ahead and hand things off to our presenter, Tyson Weister. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Deb. And thank you all so much for joining the webinar. What is the Microdata Access Tool? Building tables using MDAT in data.census.gov. My name is Tyson Weister, and I work on the communications team for data.census.gov and the Microdata Access Tool. What we have planned today is to talk about microdata basics, just so you know what we're working with, and then I'm going to show you how to make custom tables using the Microdata Access Tool through a live demonstration. We're going to walk through two different examples that will hit on the different functionality and concepts of the site. So you won't be walking away with a understanding of all the different data that are available and in-depth knowledge of the data sets, but we will be focusing on concepts of microdata and how to create the custom table using the free tool. So starting with what is public use microdata, essentially it's where we take responses that we receive from our surveys. We remove personal information so that you can't identify any particular person or household. We put some additional edits in place, like top and bottom coding, to protect the confidentiality of respondents. And then we give you that set of responses to create your own custom tables. Being public use, of course, this again means it's anonymized so that you can't identify respondents. And it's also publicly accessible through a variety of access points. We're going to be focusing today on data.census.gov/MDAT. Microdata Access Tool. The data are also available through our Public Application Programming Interface, or API. You may also download the microdata through the FTP or File Transfer Protocol sites. This is a useful method if you prefer to work with the microdata using your own statistical software, such as SAS. And then, of course, the microdata portion of public use microdata is referring to individual responses. So you must tabulate and weight these data in order to create statistics that represent a population that lives in a particular geographic area. Great news is that the tool I'm going to show you today will do that for you automatically. We'd like to take a deeper dive first, though, into talking about the difference between tabulated data and microdata. So for tabulated data, here what I'm showing is a screenshot where I went to the pre-made tables on data.census.gov, I've searched for Maryland and pulled up one of the occupation tables. So when you're searching these pre-made tables, what you're getting is an example here. There's a row that is housed under male. It says computer and mathematical occupations, and then we get one single number for Maryland. So 121,160 are the estimated number of males working in computer and mathematical occupations based on the American Community Survey data. So in order to create these pre-made tables, our statisticians here at the Census Bureau have went through the actual responses to the survey. They've tabulated and weighted the data. They've created the different columns and rows and done all this work for you. So it's just a matter of you accessing these pre-made tables. What we're going to be focusing on today is working with microdata to create custom tables. So when we're referring to microdata, we mean those individual records. Here I have a screenshot of a little bit of microdata here, and the way you would read this highlighted row is that this is referring to a male that lives in Maryland who is a web developer. That is reflected by state code 24 for Maryland, sex code 1 for male, and occupation or OCP code 1031, which corresponds to web developer. So when you're working with the microdata, you're taking those individual responses, weighting them so that they represent the total population that lives in that geographic area. Again, these responses were based on surveys, and then creating those custom tables. With that in mind, I wanted to make sure that you're always giving first consideration to the pre-made tables on data.census.gov and other sources. There are two primary reasons for this. One is that the pre-made tables give you more precise data. This is primarily because those tables are based off of the internal microdata files. Those are the actual full set of responses we received from these surveys. They are don't include those additional edits that were needed to be put in place in order to make the microdata publicly accessible. So with that, you get the more precise and more accurate information. The other reason that you always want to give pre-made tables first consideration is that they allow for more geographic detail. So for American Community Survey, you can access pre-made tables, for instance, down to the census tract or block level, 2020 census data down to the block. American Community Survey was block group, 2020 census is block. So just know that there are a lot more geographic detail options in these pre-made tables, but there's less topic detail. That's where public use microdata comes in. So that's what we're going to focus on today, is creating that custom table that will be based off of the public use microdata file. It allows more variable and topic detail, but less geographic detail, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment. Before we get there, wanted to paint a picture of the surveys and data sets that are currently available through the Microdata Access Tool. We have American Community Survey and Current Population Survey data. For American Community Survey on the left, you'll notice we include both 1 and 5 year data sets, and we have all of the available data sets back to 2005 that are relevant. For Current Population Survey, we have a variety of data sets and supplements as well. Some of the popular ones are the CPS Annual Social and Economic ASEC March Supplement, as well as the CPS Basic Monthly. We continue to add historical and migrate more of this information, as well as add additional supplements on an ongoing basis to stay up to date for the latest dataset listing that's available through the Microdata Access Tool. I encourage you to visit the link in the lower left. So we're going to work through two examples of those. I mentioned earlier that there is less geographic detail when you're working with microdata. This is so that we can give you a lot of topic detail while still protecting the confidentiality of respondents. For the American Community Survey, you'll get state level data and above, all the way up to the nation. The smallest level of geography is something called a Public Use Microdata Area, or PUMA. If you're not familiar with what those are already, we're going to talk about them before we go to our second example, so don't get too hung up for now. For the Current Population Survey, again, you're also primarily dealing with state and nation level data. There are some selected counties available in a few of the data sets, but they aren't comprehensively available for all counties. So with that background, we are going to move forward in showing you how to create the custom table. Through this demonstration, I'm going to show you through two examples how you're going to select your variables, select your geographies, make edits to your variables by limiting the universe or population that your variables and table represents, creating categories for your variables. Then we'll show you how to lay out your table by placing items in the columns versus the rows. And finally, once you've gone through all those steps, how you can conveniently save your results to access your custom table later on or share it. For our first example, I chose something very basic, variables that have just a couple of response options just to get us started. So the custom table I'm going to create first is look at sex by disability status, specifically for the population without health insurance. We're going to pull this data for Texas and look at it from the current population survey, annual social and economic supplement. Again, before you create that custom table, always want to make sure a pre-made table doesn't cover this already. This is a screenshot just showing you that I've done a little bit of research. I found this table H-01 on census.gov from the current population survey. It does show male and female and whether they have health insurance, but there's no additional detail explaining whether these populations have disability or don't have disability. So since we've done that, checking through the pre-made tables, this is a good use case to proceed with creating a custom table. So now we're ready to go ahead and create that. I would go to data.census.gov to access the Microdata Access Tool. And then once you get to our landing page here, we'll give it just a second to load up. In the upper right, you'll see Microdata. So I'm going to click Microdata. That's going to take us to the Microdata Access Tool. You can also simply visit data.census.gov/MDAT in lowercase letters in order to get to the Microdata Access Tool landing page. Two steps you need to do when you get here first is select your data set and your vintage. So we had mentioned current population survey. I'll click into the drop-down menu and we wanted the annual social and economic March supplement. Then below, you can choose your vintage. It will give you the most recent first and all the historical data sets included below. I'm going to proceed with the March 2022 supplement. Then click Next in the lower right. So what we're going to be doing is working through these tabs at the top through the different steps. We'll choose our variables, then our geographies. If we have any edits to our variables, we'll make those in the data cart. We will lay out our table and place our variables in the columns and rows, and then we'll view the table and download the results. So I'm going to be working sequentially through these steps at the top of the tab. First thing to do is select variables, and I had mentioned wanting to get sex, disability, and health insurance. My favorite way to search for the variables, they're in this list below. There's 707 for this particular data set, so you probably don't want to scroll through all of them to find what you're looking for. I like to click into the label search box and type a keyword. So here I'm going to type in sex, and we get one match. So the variable name is A_sex. The label is demographic sex. There are two values for this variable, and I always recommend clicking details on the far right in order to see what those values are. So we can see this variable provides 1 for male and 2 for female. So exactly what we need. Once you're ready to make that selection, mark the checkbox to the left of A sex, and notice in our data cart, it says 1 in parentheses, which indicates we've selected the variable. We will repeat this process for our next two variables. So I'll click into the label search box, delete the text, and then we're going to type in our next keyword. So I'm going to type in disability here. Do be mindful of your spelling and wording. It is looking for an exact text match for the label. Browsing through these options, we can see at the top of the screen are variables that provide information for specific types of disabilities. And we get some information about disability income and benefits. And after you've taken some time to browse through these, I've noticed that there is a variable called disability recode disabled. Now, I want data for people that are disabled without kind of regard to specific types of disabilities. So I'm going to click details and see what this has to say. The description says, does this person have any of these disability conditions? And if they have any of these conditions, it will give them a value of 1 for yes, that they have one or more of those conditions, or a value of 2 for no, they do not have any of those disabilities. So after referencing these variables and taking some time to read through this, it's clear that this is the variable that we want. So we'll check the box to the left of PRDISFLG in order to add that to our data cart as well. Scrolling back up, we'll choose our last variable for health insurance. I'm just going to type health into the search box. Browsing through, we also have a few different options to choose from. I'm going to look at the one that's now currently covered by health insurance coverage. There are 2 options, and we're going to click details. Currently covered means that the respondent was covered at the time they completed the survey, and a value of 1 means yes, they had health insurance, and 2 being no, they did not have health insurance. So I'll check the box to the left of that variable, and we have our 3 variables selected in our data cart: sex, disability, and health. Now that I'm done selecting my variables, we are ready to move on to the next step. I'll click Select Geographies tab at the top. We'll see the orange bar indicating we're in this section of the tool, and we get the option to select state-level geographies. Now, if we didn't make a selection here, we would get data for the overall United States. I wanted data for Texas, so I'm going to click State on the left, scroll down, and mark the checkbox for Texas. And we'll see the selection is included below. At this time, I did want to take a moment just to point out there's a lot of scroll bars on your screen. So 1, 2, 3, 4 scrolls. Be mindful of what you're clicked into and where you're scrolling, and just remember that there are a lot of scroll bars if you're having any issues seeing anything. Also, you can press Control plus or Control minus to adjust the zoom level on your screen. I find that helpful if I'm having trouble finding something. I'm going to be adjusting my zoom level throughout the presentation to show you the details for this, but if you're having any trouble finding something on your end, do be mindful of those 2 items. But for now, we've selected our geography. I'd like to move to the data cart. This is where you can limit the universe for your table, or the population that your table represents, as well as create custom categories and further define your variables. In this example, I wanted to limit the universe of my table just to include people who do not have health insurance coverage. So on the left, you'll see each of your 3 variable selections. The orange bar is for health insurance that were clicked into that variable. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll notice include in universe. So I'm going to uncheck the box for yes, and only include people who know are not currently covered by health insurance. And at this time, I don't need to make any other adjustments to my variables. So I'm going to go to the table layout. We'll click that tab at the top. The biggest takeaway from the table layout on the left-hand side, there's columns, rows, and not on table. Any variables that appear in columns and rows are going to be cross-tabulated in your table. It does not matter whether you place something in a column or a row. It's just going to aesthetically change the order and the way the numbers appear on your screen, but it's going to pull the same set of numbers. We're going to make some adjustments so you can see that a little bit more clearly. Any variable that's included not on table means that there isn't going to be a row or column for that variable in your table. But if you excluded any of those values from your universe in the data cart, your table would only represent the population accordingly. So as an example, we had excluded people with health insurance coverage. and notice that it says on the right-hand side, currently covered by health insurance coverage and no. If you don't want that in your table view or table display, you can just drag that to not on table. So I'm going to click, hold, and drop now code from columns down to not on table. And notice that on the right-hand side of the screen, it's taken that out of view. So just another option for you if you don't want potentially repeating or unnecessary labels in your table, not on table is an option for you. Moving on, my personal preference is to have a table layout that looks similar to the pre-made table. So typically geographies being in the columns and my variables being in the rows. That's how I prefer to view my table. So I'm going to click, drag, and drop selected geographies into columns. And now notice when I make that selection, we see selected geographies Texas in the column. It was previously in the row. Next, I'm going to move my variables, disability and sex, from the columns to the rows. I'm going to drag and drop from columns to rows. And notice it's just changing the layout of how items appear. It hasn't requested any of the numbers to create the custom table. The table layout tab is specifically designed so you can get a sense for how you want the columns and rows to look first and make those changes very quickly without having to wait for the system to request that data, fill it in with values just yet. So at this point, I'm pretty happy with my table layout. I have Texas in the column. I have male, female, and whether they have disability, yes, no. And then we know that our total table is adjusted so that it's only reflecting people that do not have health insurance. So once you're happy with your table layout, you can click in the lower right, View Table. If you wanted to make any of those adjustments I just did, they can be a little touchy in the Table Layout tab. I wanted you to see visually how the table was changing, but you can change columns and rows by moving the pills, as they're called, on this table between the different options. Always like to take a view of the label at the top. Again, we're getting data from the Current Population Survey Annual Social and Economic March Supplement. It's from the 2022 vintage. The site has automatically applied the weight so that it knows that these data are person level variables, and it's calculated the weight so that the data represent the total number of people. In some cases, you may be dealing with family, household, or other types of variables. In here, weights for selected variables, person is the only one. So this means that all three of the variables we selected are person level variables. So it's pretty clear cut that the system automatically knew to apply the person level weight. I also usually double check the universe statement. Here again, the universe has been restricted to Texas and to people that do not have health insurance coverage. And then scrolling down, we can take a look at the data. So the way we would read this, as an example, in Texas, we can see that there were total males, yes, for being disabled, and that the approximately 192,937 males have a disability, live in Texas, and do not have health insurance. That number for females is 146,925. Once you've gone through these steps, there are a few different ways you can share results or save them. In the upper right, there's a download share button. I'm going to go ahead and click that. And on the left-hand side, we can see a few different options for us. There is table view, which I'm going to download that to start. If you wanted the individual microdata, do know that you can download that as well. But scrolling down, I first just want to show you what the table view looks like. Then I'll show you some additional output methods below. So I'm going to click the download button. I'm using Google Chrome, so in the lower left, I'll open up that download file. And we're going to get something that looks very similar to the table display. So same order for columns and rows and the same data that we were referencing. Great way to save your results. Another option for you is to grab the URL from your address bar or through the copy bookmark button. Once you share that in an email, or open it up later, it's going to take you to the same table. It will usually pause for a bit on that landing page and then go to the table and fill it in for you. And if you're interested in accessing the data through our API, we do provide those queries here. So the data are powered by the Microdata API. There are two different types of Microdata API options for you. One is API GET, and that is going to give you the microdata, so those individual records and responses that correspond to the data that was used to create that custom table we were seeing on screen. Again, it's giving you the the sex code, disability code, and then the health insurance code. If you would like to use the API to get the table view, you can use the copy API tabulate query. Once you run that, rather than give you that individual information, you'll notice the same data that we were finding on the table display, and those were some of the numbers we read out for females and males with disability without health insurance in Texas. So just showing you that those are there. If you're interested in learning more about the Microdata API, we encourage you to go to census.gov/developers and check out the Microdata API user guide. For now, I would like to show you some more of the great functionality that already exists on the Microdata Access Tool. And before we get to our second example, I did want to take a moment to explain what these public use microdata areas, or PUMAs, are, in case you're not familiar with them already. They are population-based, so typically 100,000 people or more. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see in the northeast, those more densely populated areas have PUMAs that have smaller land area compared to areas that are more rural, like Wyoming, where those public use microdata area boundaries cover a larger land space. With that, public use microdata areas nest within state level boundaries. They cover the entire country. They're typically based off of census tracts and counties as the building blocks, and they are redefined after each decennial census. Most cities and metro areas that have 100,000 people or more, you can use PUMAs in order to find the data for that particular city or metro area. So an example of this on the left-hand side of the screen, I'm showing you how the PUMA boundaries overlap with Orleans Parish, which is also the city of New Orleans. So on the left-hand side, there are 3 PUMAs I've selected. When you access data for those 3 PUMAs and add it up, you're getting data for Orleans Parish. When you're looking at, on the right-hand side of the screen, county equivalents that have smaller population size, so populations of under 100,000, typically how you'll see this play out is a single PUMA will span multiple counties or county equivalents. In this example on the right, we're showing a screenshot of PUMA 01900 that covers 3 county equivalents, St. James, St. John the Baptist, and St. Charles parishes. If you'd like to use PUMAs, they are very easy to access on the Microdata Access Tool. You'll go to the select geographies, choose Public Use Microdata Area, choose your state, and then follow the prompts. We are going to take a look at this on the live site in just a moment, but before we get there, again, always doing our research, making sure there's no pre-made table that covers what we want. So ultimately, I'm interested in looking at poverty status broken out by age. I went to the pre-made tables on data.census.gov. I was able to select Baltimore City. I was able to find this detailed poverty data, and it does break the information out by age. So we see under 5 years, 5 years, 6 to 11 years old, 12 to 14, etc. So great to have some of this data, but what if we wanted data for poverty status broken out by single year of age? Since the pre-made table doesn't cover it, another good use case for us to create a custom table using the Microdata Access Tool. So we are going to transition and show you that in our second demonstration, recoding continuous variables and selecting PUMAs. Going back to the site here, I'm going to click Microdata in the upper left. For this, I want to use the American Community Survey, so I'll choose Select Dataset. I'm going to choose ACS 5-year estimates public use microdata sample. I'm using the 5-year so that I have more responses since I am asking for very detailed topics and detailed geographies. Next, under vintage, just going to confirm that I'm using the most recent vintage, which is the 2021 ACS 5-year estimates. I'll click Next in the lower right, and then we'll work to select our variables. Now, last time I had mentioned that my favorite way to select variables was to use the label search box. There are other ways you can go about selecting your variables. One is if you found the variable before and you know the variable code, you can go ahead and type that in. So clicking under variable, I'm going to type age_p. Oh, sorry, it's just HP, apologize. And with that, we will see what we are looking for. So HP, age, there are 2 response options, and then you always want to check out the details. So in this case, we can see age, again, 0 being under 1 year old, and age with 1 to 99, where 99 years old is top coded. That just means if someone reported their age as 105, we would show it in this data as a maximum of 99 to just protect their confidentiality since we wouldn't have received many responses with that value. Once we're ready to select this, I'm going to check the box, but anytime you see a range in values, that's a continuous variable. And notice at the top of our screen, we're getting a message with an orange banner, just letting us know that we have selected a continuous variable. If we want to use the variable, typically you need to make some edits in your data cart, but we'll talk more about that in just a moment. I am going to delete age P from that box and show you one other way you can go about selecting, which is filter by topic. So clicking filter by topic and then scrolling, I'm going to click on poverty and it pulls up poverty option here. So under POV PIP, income to poverty ratio recode, this is giving us data for someone whose income is 0 to 500% of the poverty level, as well as 501% or more. So we're going to talk about this through conceptually when we get to the data cart, but for now, we're knowing that this is a continuous variable. It's not a yes, no, in poverty, not in poverty. It's giving us a little bit more detail. So once we've made that selection, our data cart has 2 in parentheses. We're ready to proceed to our next step. We have age and we have poverty. Next, we'll choose Baltimore City Pumas. So select geographies. On the left-hand side, Public Use Microdata area. We'll follow the prompts, choosing Maryland. We get a list of those areas. So I wanted Baltimore City. There are 5 public use microdata areas that make up Baltimore City. I checked the box for all 5 and scrolled down to verify that those selections have been captured. Next, ready to move on to the data cart. Through the data cart, anytime you select a continuous variable, I had mentioned that there would be a range in the description. You'll also see a slider here for the variable, and you can see both of those variables have sliders. This means that they're continuous variables and the site does not know what to do with them without you telling the site how to categorize and specify those continuous variables. So that's what we're going to be doing. It's called create custom group. We also refer to it as recoding a variable. And what you're doing is creating categories for how you want your rows and columns to be for poverty and age in the table. I'm going to start with create custom group for POV PIP. You want to make sure that you have all the boxes checked for any response option that you want to potentially appear in your table in some way. I'm going to keep them all and create custom group. So the first thing that's going to happen is group label will appear. Here's where you can type in below poverty, and that is going to identify that label will carry over to your column or your row depending where you place the variable. You do need to make sure that below you are telling the site which values correspond to the label you just created. So for someone whose income is below the poverty level, they would have income of 0% up to 99% of poverty level. So 0 to 99, you can click into these boxes and adjust the value, and then you'll click Save Group. So this is where you are taking a deeper dive into the variable, making sure that you're understanding the meaning and telling the site which categories you want. Once you've clicked Save Group, you'll see below poverty the values you assigned, and the very first option will tell you all of the values you have not created categories for, called Not Elsewhere Classified. You'll click Edit Group in the upper right for Not Elsewhere Classified to continue this step, and you can create as many categories as you want. The next one that I want to create is people whose income is at or above the poverty level. So this would be anyone whose income is 100% of the poverty level or more. That would include my first option here, between 100 and 500%, and the third option, 501% or more. Once I have those selections, I'll click Save Group. I can see on the page once again, I have my label and the values that correspond with it. Last thing I'll do is click once more into Not Elsewhere Classified and see what I have left. It is a NA response. So this is referring to people that aren't relevant to the variable. I'm going to call this Not in Poverty Universe. We'll click Save Group on the right. And now we have our three options: below poverty, at or above, and not in poverty universe. Notice on the left, it's POV PIP_RC1 for recode 1. We are going to do something similar for age. On the left, we'll click Age P. We have the continuous variable. We have to tell the site what to do with it. I'm going to click Create Custom Group. And we wanted single year of age. So I'm going to start at under 1 year. I'm going to type that into group label, mark the checkbox under 1 year, and then click Save Group. That gives us value of 0, referring to under 1 year, and we still have to tell the site what to do with 1 to 99. I'm going to click Edit Group. Going to, go back to there. We'll click the checkbox for 1 to 99 years. We can start at a value of 1 and end at a value of 1. And we're going to call this 1. We'll click Save Group. We see under 1 year, we see 1, and then we still have to classify 2 to 99. So I think you could get the point by now. It's a little tedious if we were to go through this one by one all the way up to 99. This is where the auto group functionality comes in. So what I've been showing you so far is how you can manually create recodes. Anytime you'd like to do this process in bulk, you can click Create or Auto Group. It will tell you it's going to start at age 2, end at age 99, and whether you want 1 year age increments, 5 year age increments, that's where you'll put your value in the groups of. So I want single year of age. I'm going to keep it at 1 and then click Auto Group. And notice that it has grouped those remaining values in bulk here and done that process very quickly all the way up through 99. And now that we've created those edits, ready to click View Table. We're looking at ACS 5-year estimates. It has the 2021 vintage. It has applied the person weight. That makes sense. We're working with poverty at the person level and age. Next, we'll choose whether we want items to be in the rows or columns. I'm going to show you how to do it by dragging the pills. I usually like my geographies in the column, so just going to drag that over. Then we have these not on table. These are recodes that we created for single year of age and below poverty and at or above poverty. So I'm going to drag those variables. I want them to show in my table, and I'm going to place them in the rows. Anytime you have those recoded variables, you will see the original variables in value and table cells options. This is telling you that if you look to the drop-down menu just below, Notice there is average options and count. Anytime you have a continuous variable, it is going to default to one of those averages. You probably do want count. Most people are looking for the counts that's representing the total number of people, in this case in poverty, across each age group, rather than the average age or average income to poverty ratio for those groups. So if you're ever seeing numbers that don't quite make sense before, double check and make sure that this has been set to count. And then lastly, just confirming the universe, we did restrict to the 5 public use microdata areas in Baltimore City. And now we'll take a look at the table below. We get each of the public use microdata areas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, total number of people in the first row. And then the very first column has summed up the data. So it is telling us that there are, for instance, the second row is below poverty, 115,794 people living in Baltimore City below the poverty level. If you look at the row below that, that number is 1,622 people under 1 year old in poverty in Baltimore City. And as you scroll down, you'll see the poverty numbers for your different age groups all the way up to 99. So before we start transitioning to your questions, excited to hear what questions you all have for us. Wanted to recap some of the limitations and benefits of the Microdata Access Tool and give a little more details of some items we haven't discussed yet. Do keep in mind, if you want to calculate medians or margins of error, our site does not currently have the functionality to do that. If you want percentages, you would need to calculate the underlying totals and calculate the percentages on your own based on the totals provided. The site does also not have the functionality to show data over time in a single view. If you needed data over time, you could click the vintage drop-down menu at the top of the table and edit that between the different years in order to see the data 1 year or 1 month at a time, depending on which set you are looking at. We also do not currently have the functionality to calculate average over time for monthly CPS data sets. And you do need to use the variables as is. You can't create new variables from existing variables. One example of this is you're not able to apply reported dollar values against the inflation adjustment variable like ADG Inc. in ACS datasets for dollar values. With that in mind, though, there are a lot of benefits of using the Microdata Access Tool. Again, keep in mind it gives you more detail compared to what you could get from the pre-made tables. You can create those custom tables, save and download your results easily, and you don't need statistical software knowledge or statistical software resources and money in order to do this. When you visit our site, there is a feedback link on the landing page that allows you to send an email to census.data@census.gov. Please let us know how we can make the site work better for you by shooting us an email, as well as we can answer your data questions. We do update the site continuously based on user feedback. If you visit the link on the left or QR code that we have posted here, it allows you to sign up for our monthly newsletter. So you can subscribe to those data.census.gov updates in order to stay tuned for those latest enhancements, data releases, and educational opportunities to help you make the most of the site. In addition, we have a variety of workshops if you'd like some hands-on practice. There are 5 different workshop topics that we offer. One of those is the basics of using the Microdata Access Tool. We just launched this workshop this year, so it's your opportunity, if you have the 3 hours, to really take a deep dive into the site with some more live demonstrations, opportunity to work on those hands-on exercises, and then work through the answer as a group with your questions answered real time from our instructors. So encourage you to visit those in order to learn even more. With that, I'm going to transition back over to Deb, and we are looking forward to answering your questions that you have for us today.
Great. Thank you so much, Tyson. Just confirming that you can hear me?
Yes, coming through clear.
Thank you so much. All right. So as Tyson just said, in a few moments, we are going to begin our question and answer session. We will be taking your questions over the WebEx audio. So to queue up for a question, you can use the raise hand icon that is located next to your name and also at the bottom center of your WebEx screen. When we call your name, you will then need to unmute yourself to ask your question. Just be aware that there may be a slight lag after you unmute yourself. But if you do have a question, we encourage you to go ahead and start queuing up now if you like. And before we start opening up the lines for Q&A, I would like to take a moment to invite you all to give us your thoughts on today's webinar through an evaluation survey. You can tell us if you found today's webinar valuable, what you liked about it, if there are areas where we can improve, and you can even suggest other topics that you would like us to cover in future webinars. We definitely read all of the great comments and suggestions that you provide. So I'm going to go ahead and send the link to the evaluation in the chat. So we'd appreciate it if you could just take a moment to fill that out. Now, if you have questions remaining after we conclude our session today, please feel free to reach out to one of the two email inboxes listed here. If you are a member of the public, please reach out to the Center for Enterprise Dissemination at census.data@census.gov. And for members of the media, you can contact the Public Information Office at pio@census.gov. So with that, let's see if we have any questions in the queue, and it looks like we do. Can we please unmute Laura's line? And Laura, once you have the ability to unmute yourself, please do so. Can you hear us? We can. Hi.
Hi. Okay, my question is, I am asking about the Pumas. So, for instance, if I want to look at household income, and then I'm looking at the state of Hawaii, and then I'm looking at the county level Pumas. For Honolulu County, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 8 separate Pumas. So if I want to find the value for the total Honolulu County, are you saying that the Pumas don't overlap, that we could just, if it's individual counts, we could just sum together all of the Honolulu counties? Or if it's, for instance, income, we could take like the mean or the median of all of the Honolulu County to find the total Honolulu County value. Does that make sense?
Yes, I'm tracking your question. So the Pumas do not overlap with each other, so you would be able to add up the data from those counties.
Okay.
We do not have the functionality, though, to calculate median on our site whatsoever. And for mean, you would only be able to see the mean of the individual Pumas. You could add up total distributions of household income across different ranges that you specify in the total column. So this is kind of what we were doing for the Baltimore example. This total column does represent Baltimore City. These are the numbers, but we are in count. If you were in mean, which we call average in this drop-down menu, and selected one of those, your total column goes away. We don't have total for mean.
Okay, but what about if we were just looking at income instead of count? So you would provide the income for each of those different geographies, and if I wanted to find the income for the overall county, I would just take an average of all of the counties, right? Does that make sense? Am I being clear?
We could maybe discuss it in a little more detail if you wanted to write in your question.
Okay.
Because there's a couple of nuances, and I think that might help us a bit, because the way the variables work are going to be similar to the way I'm showing now. So
yes. Okay. Understood.
Yeah, if you could get with us, that would be helpful.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for your question. And then I've also sent the email address out in the chat for anybody who does have questions and would rather send them in or submit them via email. That email address is in the chat for you all. So we do have another question in queue from Albert. Let's go ahead and unmute your line. And then Albert, once you are able to unmute yourself, please do so. Albert, can you hear us? Are you still in queue for your question? Okay, we'll give Albert a minute. But Tyson, in the meantime, we did receive a question via the Q&A panel that I'd like to ask you. And the question reads, where do you go again to see the pre-tabulated tables to check? You mentioned to always check to see the pre-tabulated tables first. Where are those?
Great question. So for the American Community Survey, you would just be going to data.census.gov. We'll give it just a second to load up here on screen. I went to this at the very beginning of my demonstration, and then I clicked the Microdata tab in the upper right. If you wanted to look at the pre-made tables, you would want to use the single search bar or the advanced search and use the functionality you're seeing right here on the landing page. That would take you to the American Community Survey tables as one example. And then the current population survey pre-made tables, those are primarily on census.gov. Which is not our area of expertise. We were on data.census.gov, but if you ever needed help finding that, certainly write us in and we can give you more guidance there.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tyson. Let's go ahead and try Albert's line again. Can we try to unmute again? And then Albert, you can look out for the mute button. It should be accessible to you once we unmute your line. All right. Well, let's go ahead and, all right, so let's go ahead and unmute Elise's line, please. And Elise, once you are able to do so, please go ahead and unmute yourself on your end. Can you hear us?
Agency that monitors health and socioeconomic outcomes for Native Hawaiians. But looking at the census data, one of our challenges is we always need to look for the statistics that are done on the Native Hawaiian in any combination population. And so I was hoping that this plumes level data might provide individual level data that I could use to construct that population's numbers, partly because a lot of the data census tables that are available are many years behind for this particular breakout of information. There are a lot of the data census tables for the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander race category, but we have a legal mandate to specifically look at Native Hawaiians in any combination. So I'm trying to see what is available. So I guess my question is, for this individual level data, is it possible to get that sort of level of ethnicity breakout? It didn't seem available in this platform, but I was wondering if there is another way to access it, perhaps through the API.
Yeah, thanks for your question. So there are a couple parts to that. First, I did want to point out for data.census.gov in the pre-made tables for Native Hawaiian, you had mentioned the data coming out more slowly, which is correct, but I did just want to point out in this June, the ACS is planning to release an update of that information, and then some information from the decennial census would be coming later on this year as well. That would give you Native Hawaiian alone and in any combination. So do be mindful that that's coming in, will be a little bit more updated. But in terms of the question that you specifically asked, is it available through the Microdata Access Tool? The answer to that is yes. There are a couple of different race variables for American Community Survey, so you would want to use the ACS data sets, and then you would be looking for race as the variable. So they have different levels of looking at race. So you wouldn't want to use the most basic race variables, but more detailed ones, you would be able to use these more detailed ones and start specifying what it is that you're looking for. You can see it gives the very detailed combination. So it may be a little tedious to get what you're looking for, but I would point you to like these detailed race variables. And if you have any questions, email us in from there.
Great, thank you so much for that. And thank you for your question, Elise. So we don't have any other questions in the queue, but we did get 2 questions in the Q&A panel that I'll go ahead and read out to you, Tyson. The first question reads, do you work with educators to allow people to use the Microdata Access Tool with CodeApp, its common online data analysis platform, which is a tool to do data analysis for grades 6 to 16?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'm not aware personally of having worked with that group or that tool before. We do provide custom trainings through our program, as well as data dissemination specialists. If you wanted help learning how to make the most of the data that are available through us and see if you could potentially integrate it into that tool. And I've definitely done similar types of custom types of requests in the past. And actually on the slide I'm showing now, if you do have a training request and would like us to work with your group, it's said.cedsci.outreach@census.gov. And also, I wanted to go back to the last question. I didn't answer the portion about the API, I believe. The API will not give you additional detail compared to what you're getting from the Microdata Access Tool. It's just an additional way to access the data. I did want to point that out. Some people think the API has more detailed information, and that's not the case for this microdata.
All right, thank you for clarifying, Tyson. And then the next question that we received is, on the age continuous variable, how would you exclude an age group, for example, under 25?
Yep, so if you didn't want it to appear in your table whatsoever, since I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and select it really quickly. You go to your data cart. If you didn't want anyone under 25 in your table before you click Create Custom Group for the first time, I just had created it, you would want to edit that starting value. So you would want to start at 25 through 99, and then you would also want to uncheck the box to exclude those people from age 0. And now if you click Create Custom Group, it is going to automatically just take those people out whatsoever, and you could start specifying your category from here.
Excellent. I hope that that answers the question. I certainly learned something, but we currently don't have any additional questions in queue, Tyson. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Deb, and thank you all so much for joining in your questions. I did want to point out that we have a resource page dedicated to help you make the most of using the Microdata Access Tool. You can visit the link in the upper left. We're also, as a reminder, here for your feedback and data questions, as well as training requests. So please check out these materials. We have PDFs, short videos, recorded webinars, and then, of course, those workshops that we mentioned. In addition, I had discussed during the Q&A how we have local data dissemination specialists. They are located throughout the country to help you answer your data questions as well as provide custom trainings. You can request their assistance by contacting census.askdata@census.gov and 1-844-ASK-DATA. Thank you all so much again for joining. We hope to see you in a future webinar. Thank you.